restore itself. And that had a lot more to do with an individual. So I think when you're building a school, I think you have to have some thoughts about what you need now, but you also have to think about what you need tomorrow. And you have to figure out a way to develop an institution that doesn't rely on particular individuals.
So talk to me about, now you mentioned the science room, for example. So what are some of the shifts and changes that you've noticed along the way in designing a school and the implementation of some of your ideas? What are some, just the day-to-day challenges?
Yeah, those extras get short shrift, right? Because you're constrained by space, right? Even no matter where you are, public school or charter school or, public charter school or public school or even a private school, the space that has to be committed to an initiative to have really good exploratory science is the first thing people go after if you need to add another classroom. And so science on carts and art on carts and music on carts has become the default position for things because they're constrained by space. And while you understand that, I think if you're looking to integrate an entire program for children, science in particular, but everything else, and I don't say science to throw out the kind of weasel word of STEM or anything like that. I think it is important for our children to have an understanding about how science works, whether or not they are going to become scientists.
Okay.
So, if nothing else, the understanding of scientific thinking and the understanding of developing a hypothesis and figuring out a methodical way of testing it out, it's rather old-fashioned, but I don't know that anyone really teaches that in a way that's consistent with what it takes to be a scientist, and I think we should. And I think all children should have exposure to it.
So who makes the decisions about, you said you were on the curriculum committee. How is that decision-making process implemented from board to school, for example?
So it has become a relatively iterative process, which is to say, we started out with a vision. The administration has to kind of carry our water and develop. We don't actually develop the curriculum, but we say what it is that we want included in it. So we come out with a vision, and we are explicit about things that we think are our priorities above and beyond the kind of reading, writing, arithmetic, right? So as an example, we think literacy is important. We invested money in a library, and we said we have to come up with a program, any program, in this particular case, it's Drop Everything and Read, that encourages kids to read consistently and read for enjoyment. And that means that we're happy to buy books. We're happy to make sure that kids go home with books, and that they go home with books that can either be their own or that are borrowed. So we establish priorities, and then someone who knows more about pedagogy than we do tells us how they're going to implement. And then we shift and modify as necessary to achieve kind of programmatic and other goals as within the context of making sure the testing happens. We established that we don't want to be kind of kill and drill, for lack of a better term. But we do understand that there are some testing techniques that have to be reviewed, and we try to carve out that from the curriculum without disturbing it too much. So that's one kind of set of priorities that we set. We set a priority, if you will, of a goal of just kind of paying homage to the kids about the fact that we expect them to go to college. And so at the board, we started modest 529 accounts, not to pay for college, but to really give them the idea that you start thinking about this now.
Nice.
When we talk about history, social studies, or whatever we call it in the day, I mean, we've gotten as granular in discussions about curriculum, frankly, to when are we going to explicitly start teaching grammar, right? And what does it mean to have, core standards, not common core, but a core, a standard and a core curriculum. And we explore things very carefully, and then we talk about whether or not we can implement them, and then we talk about timelines, because I think the one of the other things that I've seen, although I probably have a lot of patience, is that people want implementation to happen tomorrow, and I think it's important with a school not to be constantly zigging and zagging, but to kind of meander your way towards a path to your goal.
Very nicely stated. I like that description better.
Thank you.
Because that is the common. Let's get everything done tomorrow.
Well, but you have to balance that with the notion that people have that everything is everyone thinks it's urgent.
Yeah.
To do everything now, and you get that, right?
Yeah.
Because we have these kids right now, and how are we going to affect their outcomes? And so that's very important. But you don't serve them well by zigging and zagging either. So there's a balance.
Yeah.
We try it.
So talk to me about your relationship with other board members. How does that dynamic work? Just out of curiosity. And then also, how do you engage board members in the decision making? And how do you get board members to become board members of charter schools?
So, relationships with board members, it's interesting because we are a board that has evolved organically. We do not all have the same background, although there are a couple of common threads of mutual friendships, of which I'm not included, that goes back for a while. But we're a board that sits down and talks and discusses and tries to get consensus about things. So we have basically, because there are a couple of people on the board, I'm going to say myself and another person who has a finance background, who understand what it takes to run a meeting and who understand governance.
Right.
There are people on the board who are constantly reminders and reminding of them of ourselves and each other. We police ourselves around whether or not we're involved in the minutia, as an example, or whether or not we are overstepping our bounds as a board, and what decisions we should or shouldn't be making. And I think in this particular case, we were a board that is so caring about what the outcomes are for our children that manifests itself in the way that we make decisions. We're not overly rash about things, and we talk. It can be very Socratic. Without, the charter school board has to meet once a month by law, and we do that. In the beginning, I think we spent a lot of time being a little bit of a committee of the whole, and with some discipline and guidance, we figured out how to split a very small board into small committees and subcommittees and report up. So that has been working well, and we get along well. So we go on a board retreat, which is a day or 2 days every year, that we sit together in each other's presence and talk about something loftier than the day-to-day business of running the board. And in that, we get to know each other better. The people who have clashed heads in the past most vigorously don't clash heads in the same way anymore, because they realize they're on the same side, and that we listen closely and realize, oh yeah, we actually do agree. We just haven't said things exactly the same way. And that takes time, right?
Yeah.
So, in developing a board, I think it is helpful to have some advocates for just kind of common sense behavior on the board. How we get people has been very interesting, but we have tried to get more, although it is not always easy, in particular because our school is out in Queens. And but what has ended up happening, the way that we've done it all, is we've come across people who may or may not be interested, and we've talked to them, and we've brought them to the school, and we've said, wouldn't you like to come and join? And that's what's happened. It's been very... it also, to be fair, our board isn't structured with a lofty give or get, right? So we have, as a group, said that the goal of our board is more to help organize the school and less to get millions and millions of dollars. And we've actually shied away from trying to get a dominant, sugar daddy on the board, particularly because we don't want a board that's governed by money. We want a board that's governed by discussion.
Nice.
And we have hired a principal who can live on our per pupil revenue and keep money in the bank. And we're careful and judicious about the way we spend our money.